Namaste, Pranam, and welcome to the first broadcast of Shadow Strategists. In this broadcast, we'd like to tell you why we have chosen the name of Shadow and Strategists. Let's start with the later. Strategists, because that's what we believe we are good at. कुछ मालूम है strategy के बारे में, कुछ सोचते हैं, कुछ समझते हैं, काफ़ी पढ़ते हैं, काफ़ी दूसरों के पढ़ते हैं, और दूसरों के समझते हैं. To get a perspective of what is actually the game behind the game, the stories behind the stories, the untold narratives that exist all around us, yet some of us may be aware or not aware of this. Now let's come to the former. Why shadow? We believe where there's light, there's a shadow. Like in photography, the brighter the light, the sharper the shadow. So we thought let's follow the sun and find what the shadows have to say. Our plan for this channel, at least for the first program, was to start with the sun and follow its journey all the way back to where it first rises, Japan. This episode was supposed to be about Japan. Lots happening in Japan, right? We probably had the longest serving prime minister who suddenly stepped down, an economy that is trying to come to terms with its aging demography, bouncing back, flexing its newly discovered muscles on defense, tying up and forming a triad with the US. So we want to discuss about Japan. Then probably come down to a bit of Australia, which is a country completely in a boil. Most of us in India are ignorant about it. हम इतने पढ़ते नहीं हैं, इतने जानते नहीं हैं, इतने समझने की कोशिश नहीं करते कि हो क्या रही है ऑस्ट्रेलिया में. हमारे लिए अभी भी वो कैंगारू और बहुत बढ़िया घूमने वाली जगह है ऑस्ट्रेलिया. But from a geo-strategy perspective, it is a country in a boil. Then I wanted to come down to Hong Kong. Everybody knows it's in a boil. It's actually on fire. And then to Singapore, Vietnam, Laos. That was our plan. But then China is in the topic all over. So what we started off with Japan, we're changing our course and we're starting with China. Like they say, China tha Japan pahunch gaye, Cheen samajh gaye na. Let's come back to China. What is the story in China? Story about China as far as India is concerned is not about Ladakh. Ladakh is the symptom. COVID वाली कहानी है, right? वो बुखार है Ladakh. बीमारी कहीं और है. बीमारी is the newfound Mao. Read a bit about him. Very interesting reading about Xi Jinping. बहुत ही गजब कहानी है. Somebody whose father was amongst the original pioneers of communism, then was unceremoniously thrown out of the Communist Party. The entire family was thrown out to an extent where his mother had to publicly denounce his father, saying that he's a traitor to the nation, to the communist nation. As a consequence, young Xi Jinping was thrown into an agricultural camp to serve his time. From there, he worked and wormed his way back into the Communist Party. He had to apply 10 times before his application to the Communist Party was accepted. Got that, then wormed his way up with sheer hard work, brutal diligence, and like a true blue, heartless communist, so ruthless in executing whatever the party wanted him to do. That is the story of Xi Jinping. In this entire journey, one of the things that he had always built was a strong loyalty and a strong devotion to the armed forces, specifically the army, the PLA. The adolescence that he lost out, he regained in his middle-aged once he had the PLA under him as part of the military council of the Communist Party. After becoming premier, one of the things that he wanted to flex was a new idea. He first instilled himself as the next Mao. Every single move, like a master strategist playing a big chess game. He eliminated every single person who had supported him, who could compete with him, or he could come in his way, even in his valley. He just eliminated all of them so that a clear runway is laid for him. The backing that he had was the armed forces. You must understand one thing that was happening in China. In the 80s and the 90s, while China was on an upswing, right, the communists discovering capitalism, while that was happening, it was a whole pile of Communist Party personnel who were in administrative roles, who had raked in the money, illegal, ill-gotten, but riches nevertheless, right? The guys who had lost out was the military. To an extent where deep inside China, if you ask anyone who is there, and I spend time there, you would have to be the son of a poor bastard to serve in the military. You'd rather be a clerk or a peon somewhere in the Communist Party, civil leadership, because that was where the money was to be made. Highways were being built, townships were coming up, airports were being opened up, companies were being formed. Money, 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 right? To a country which didn't have food, right? And suddenly they were now stuffed through every orifice with money. The only buggers who didn't have were the military. They just had to dress up in the uniform, march up and down, living up to what is there in the famous palace grounds of Beijing. Clay soldiers, perfectly dressed up, nowhere to go, nothing to do. With Xi Jinping coming up, that changed. He wanted these guys to make. Smart businessman and the business sense that he has, he figured out there's much more money to be made if we were to modernize the military. From two areas. One, any boy's fantasy, right? Guns, planes, ships, submarines, satellites, rockets. Second, technology, technology, technology. It would leapfrog them from who they were, the backyard garage of the world, to being somewhere right up there, top one or two players in the technology space. उसको ये game पसंद आए. तीसरा, most importantly, what he realized was that if you do not have a strong army, your economic projection is nothing. It is worth nothing. You would look like a plump chicken ready for the plucking from anybody else if you didn't have sharp claws and a tooth and a beak that can hurt. With the army under his control and with the entire state machinery that he now commanded, he went about building a muscle that the Chinese never even imagined that they had. The only uniform that they saw were oppressors oppressing themselves. Pakistan, right? Like that. Till then, that was the story. Once he started getting into it, everything started changing, right? New tanks, new armored personal carriers, better personal weapons, armor, aircrafts, ships, navy, submarine, missiles, rockets. Xi Jinping got everything into them to an extent where he started believing, right? Like some of us who have, our own kids or nephews busy on PlayStations thinking that they can actually win wars because they are pretty good at, whatever toy that they're playing with. Exactly like that, Xi started believing that he can be a military starter. He still believes it. It's a delusion that he lives with, but we'll come back to that in a while. With this in hand, he started creating arguably the first complex strategy that the world has ever seen. A military, economic, information, technology offensive on the world. Using the gains that the economy had got through the military muscle that they have built to project a different China in the eyes of the world. With that in mind, what he wanted to do was use economy to appropriate territories, colonies across the world. Some ancient story that he had in his mind probably, though they deny their history to a great extent, but some ancient story that he had in mind. The classic, psychologically, the classic story of someone who had lost everything and now has access to just about everything he wanted. This is a bad boy gone wrong. The interesting part for us in India, the Himalayas are not just a geographical feature. It is daunting for more reasons than one. Every time anybody had stepped foot beyond the Himalayas towards India, have either stayed back or run back. Mr. Jinping now has two choices. Be the latest Indian or run back and be the lost Han. His dream, he believes, is to subdue India, appropriate the riches of the land. He doesn't care about the history of India. He just wants the natural resources of India, right? Water fed. I once had an opportunity of talking to a very top senior level government Communist Party personnel, let's say, from China. And one of the things that he said is that you guys have, in India, you guys have an absolute abundance of riches. I can't even understand why would you be starving, right? This country is so rich, so nice, nature has been kind. You throw a seed here, it's food tomorrow. I mean, look at us. We have harsh winters, we have, 80% of our country doesn't have water, nothing, not even a blade of grass can grow there. Right? There's a tiny strip along the coast that is what we have to feed. But here, anywhere Anywhere, the length and breadth of India, from the farthest islands to the northernmost place, everything grows there. Everything is there. It's riches here, right? And there's such a large population. He said, if I could get every Indian to give me 1 rupee every day, I would retire for the rest of my life. This is a Communist Party functionary from China in a discussion with me. Xi Jinping uska baap hai. So he's only looking at India to exploit, assuming that we would carve down like some African nation or one of the Southeast Asian nations and all that. Hey, this is a land of 20,000 years of history. Many have come, tried to vanquish, subdue, conquer, dabao, do whatever with us, right? 9 out of 10 stayed back. They didn't want to go back to their own homelands. Those that came to be vanquished got conquered inside, right? And we Indians, we always welcomed every one of them on our terms. Come here, be us. We never said don't come. We never said don't come. Come with your ideology. I mean, look at what's happening all around us. I mean, you have a stream of Islam in India which nowhere else in the world. Sufis, the guy who sings, which is haram, by the way, right? We have the other Abrahamic cousins, the Christians, going around singing carols and appropriating Bharatnatyam and stuff like that. It's okay, so long as you reach to the destination that we Indians have always prided in, which is if we go to the end goal of attaining moksha, it's okay with us. Trouble is, who's going to teach all this to a communist country, right? The guys who don't believe in afterlife, the guys who don't believe in looking inside. How do you tell them that, welcome, stay back and be us? Go to that Tangra, right? And ask the Chinese who stayed back, who are they? I don't think any one of them wants to be known as a Chinese. Maybe yes, because they look different and they want to be projecting their identity. Heart of heart, they would be like a duck out of water if they go back to China. They are as Indian as any one of us. So what's happening actually? What is this game about? What is China wanting to assert, exert, seek by the current actions that's happening in our northwestern frontiers with China? Like we said, a bad boy with new toys, trying to play some mental fantasies, trying to come up with an idea of being all-vanquishing, almighty, emperor that emerged out of China in 70, 80 years. But he forgets, Mr. Xi is 68, so is Mr. Modi. They are equals more than in age. Every step he takes is called out for the misstep he makes. Bloodied his nose multiple times, to an extent where now it's become a personal battle. Yes, he won the game of deceit. But when the real game of looking eye to eye works, guess who's been caught blinking? Mr. Jinping. And that's how it's going to be. In my mind, this is not going to end peacefully. A bully has been kicked in his jewels. He's hurt, he's bent and buckled, but he's going to come back, if for nothing else, to take a wild swing. In my mind, we'll have to prepare ourselves in the next 2 or 3 months for a madman's gambit. And we are prepared, but that is likely to happen for 2-3 reasons. Firstly, November is when China is having a Communist Party meeting. November is also when the winter sets in the northern reaches. From then till about March, most of the passes and almost all of the Himalayas are inaccessible, or at least climatically hostile beyond, even the most passionate diehard man. Third thing, the other big guy in the world, the US, would be busy with its elections. So in all likelihood, prior to November, we will have one last serious mischief from China. We are prepared for it. Our soldiers are prepared for it. Are we as citizens prepared for it? That's what I would want to leave you with in this talk. We'll come back soon, carry forward our discussion on China. This time, we will discuss China and India relations from facets beyond the border, much beyond the border. We'll bring you to the Malacca Straits, to Diego Garcia, to the Trad, and beyond. Till next time, have a good time, stay in the shadows, love the light, but the shadows have a story too. Bye-bye.